Multiple world record holder of the original Sonic 06, Nick867, approached me with an idea. What if he and I went head-to-head racing the retail game against its fan remake, Project 06? It was a novel concept, as while on the surface the two games do share a lot in common, one has the reputation of being complete dog shit, and the other, well, doesn't. When a game is bad casually though, there's always a chance that all those flaws could be used to a player's advantage in a speedrunning setting, especially when it has tons of glitches like Retail 06. While on the other hand with Project 06, it's a more polished experience and a lot more fun to play casually, but there's a chance that the speedrun could be boring due to a lack of freedom and player expression. Do these games have fun speedruns? And how similar are they to each other? Let's find out by racing Retail Sonic 06 against Project 06. Since P06 only contains the stages as of right now, the rules are as follows. The run begins upon selecting the first stage on the list in the Act Trial and ends when hitting the goal ring on the final stage in that campaign. So this run is segmented between Sonic, Shadow, and Silver, with all the upgrades necessary for each run collected prior to the race. And to help you not get confused on which game is which, Retail 06's heads-up display is all condensed on the top left side of the screen, whereas P06 is split between the top left and the top right. So let's get started with Sonic the Hedgehog. 3, 2, 1... Let's go! Wave Ocean begins on the P06 side with a short automated section running through a loop, then water sliding to the beach. While this is happening, we swap to Sonic's Blue Gem, an item that uses some of the energy in the action gauge, which is essentially our mana bar, to allow him to dash forward with a burst of speed. His spin kick ability can maintain his current speed, so our fastest movement option is to use the Blue Gem followed by 2 spin kicks, in which time the action gauge will refill enough to use the gem again if we need it, as long as we're on the ground. This is our main method of movement throughout P06, but depending on the situation, such as having another gem equipped, we use the spin dash instead, which has its Adventure 1 property of being spammable to maintain top speed. After the second water sliding section, we jump over the invisible wall on the left and onto the peninsula underneath the lighthouse, where we grab a gauge up capsule, fully replenishing our action gauge on the spot. Now is when we get a little silly. P06 has an interesting quirk when jumping against slanted terrain, as it gives us a bunch more height than it would normally, kind of like a slope jump, but against a wall. The beach has a short slanted invisible wall around it, so you don't just run off into the water and die, so we utilize this by blue gemming into it, jumping, jump dashing, then very quickly bound attacking and homing attacking to the shield item on the island across the pond. In the remake, there's some added tech where Sonic can do 2 jump dashes by using the bound attack after the first one. Also for the speedrun, we use the legacy jump dash type that's been implemented, which is much faster than the original jump dash and is influenced by Sonic's current direction. Back to the stage, we do some more standard movement with the blue gem, hop on a rail, bounce over a rock, then head to the whale chasing set piece where we switch to Tails. The action gauge serves as our flight meter when playing as him, and costs more to ascend versus maintaining it. We can exploit this by feathering the fly button, allowing Tails to fly higher and farther than he could normally at the cost of not ascending as quickly, and this can be used to go from where we start as Tails all the way to the island with the switch on it without stopping. One more ascent up to it, and after a short cutscene, we enter the Mach Speed section. In the original game, which I'll refer to as Retail or Retail 06 from now on, Sonic starts in the same automation as P06 that he's able to break out of, because for some reason Sonic's collision check is larger than any other character's, which allows him to act before the dash panel sends him anywhere. And... what? So, from what I understand, scripted sequences, such as this loop, are actually homing attack targets in Retail, and when Sonic initiates a homing attack, all he does is choose a direction, then accelerates forward until he hits it. Yes, this means he could accelerate infinitely if he didn't hit anything. So Nick is able to set the blue guy at this specific angle to force a whiff on the loop target, which zooms him across the entire level, bonking into this cliff and landing in Shadow section. Though it's unused level design in Sonic's version, there's still collision, so Nick is able to navigate this section and use the Sky Gem, which works like a grappling hook in both games, to get from this part of the map over to where Tails would normally hit the switch. Then Sky Gem once more to the gate where the trigger box is active to enter the Mach Speed section. P06 gets a bit of a saving grace in the load times. Since Nick is playing off a 360, he has the original 15-ish second ones with the game installed on the hard drive, whereas mine are about 2 to 3, so that's nice. While P06 has a superior Mach Speed controls, Retail sections can be just as fast when put in the right hands. So even with the load times, Retail 06 comes out ahead after the opening stage. Moving on from the beach paradise, Dusty Desert is pretty unique between the two versions. In Retail, the fastest way to move with Sonic and the Princess is to jump dash spam, utilizing the special shield ability to walk on the sand. P06 also uses jump dashes, but of course the legacy type makes Sonic go super fast, and we have an additional tool in the anti-gravity slide. In the remake, the slide functions like a roll in which Sonic gains speed when going faster downhill and loses it faster when going uphill, and it can also maintain speed from other sources such as a light dash like the spin kick. So in Retail, the fastest way to go through the dunes is to take advantage of the openness of the level and immediately go left. And after doing a bunch of jump dashes on the sand, Nick reaches a loop where he performs another loop launch, sending him just outside the wall running section with the corkscrew. Conversely, ChaosX follows the main path to the right side of the area, grabbing some newly placed speed shoes and using that buff speed to launch off a slope to the corkscrew instead. The two games finish out the same by taking the rainbow ring following the loops, hitting a spring to the wall jump section that ignores the tower climb below, then running straight to the goal ring. Here's a fun fact for you. In Retail 06, the sand is just retextured water, and in some spots, if you fall through it, you can hear water splashes before Sonic and Elise kick the bucket. Does that work? Where are you going?
Like the fuse, he's a rocket and he's ready to go. Cause now the countdown has started and he's ready to blow.
Oh, fuck. The opening snowboard section of Eggman's base is quite similar here, though in Retail, Nick has to make sure to hold forward as the snowboard won't move regardless of the angle of the slope otherwise. ChaosX gets a nice bonus in not having to do that, plus also maintaining top speed via the new kick dash move by pressing the spin dash button repeatedly. If Nick jumps on a scripted ramp but lands before the sequence finishes, Sonic will keep its speed. This is due to the jumps working in Retail by just giving Sonic a bunch of speed and sending him airborne. In Section 2, ChaosX uses the blue gem spin kick strat to make a way across the ice bridge, bound attack to hit a switch, fly through a canyon with tails to hit another switch, then finish the level with Sonic, saving a few seconds at the end by using a blue gem to launch off a rock and get a bunch of air up to the goal ring. Or that's what should have happened anyway, so instead I had to use the sky gem to get up to the platform. In Retail, Nick takes advantage of the level layout being a giant circle by clipping through the first set of lasers and blue gemming to the end of the stage. Sometimes it looks so easy. It's a good time to mention that the action gauge, you know, the thing that limits Sonic's use of the gems, yeah, that never decreases in Retail 06, so Nick can abuse their powers to his heart's content, whereas some of the levels in P06 rely on good resource management to take advantage of the gems as much as possible. Now we enter the fiery metropolis that is Crisis City, which begins with more snowboarding. So after a quick 360, hoo! On P06's side, we head into Section 2, which has a few differences even though it's pretty linear. Rail targeting can be weird sometimes in both games, which is what happened to Nick after the beginning of Section 2, forcing him to restart it and giving me a bit of an advantage after lagging behind for the first 3 stages. It wasn't for long though, as he did this as a recovery. I have no clue how he was able to target a rail that was that far below him, but it was pretty cool. Both games have methods to cross the first big gap to avoid some rail grinding and automation. In P06, we accomplished this through blue gem slope jumping off a tiny piece of terrain that's sticking out of the side of the platform. Unfortunately, in this run I jumped a little early, not getting the height I needed, so I had to quickly switch to the purple gem, which gives Sonic an extra jump, and use my second jump dash to homing attack to the rail across the chasm. While Nick could also use the purple gem to cross this gap, which famously shrinks Sonic down and allows him to jump infinitely, that's pretty slow. So instead, he throws a sky gem, then uses the green gem's tornado to stall himself in the air as it lands on the other side, pulling him to the rail way more quickly. This is a key difference between Retail and P06's sky gems. The Retail version remains active even if switching to another one, whereas it's canceled if the same thing's done in the remake. Both ways have their advantages and disadvantages, like what you see here in Retail versus if you threw it in a bad direction in P06, you can cancel out of it. Regardless, after a bit of automation, the 06s deviate yet again. In the fan project, Sonic is able to cross another chasm through using the blue gem and purple gem in tandem, with the purple gem getting upgraded by the enemies we defeat to gain access to 2 extra jumps. This is a reintroduced mechanic in P06 that was lost during Retail's development, the gem level up system. Enemies in both games drop energy cores that fly into the character, which fill up a small bit of the action gauge, but in P06's case also fill up Sonic's maturity meter, which you can think of as the gem's experience bar. After collecting 3 cores with a gem equipped, it'll level up, then another 3 will max it out. The purple gem gains an additional jump per level, and works in real time, so Sonic doesn't have to land on the ground or anything to gain the next jump if it does so. On Retail 06's side, Nick again uses the sky gem to launch himself over to the loop, but to get a good angle, he has to run off the platform and into the chasm. He ended up throwing the gem too low, and I must say he does this incredibly, improvises using the green gem to stall himself in the air until the sky gem despawns, in which case he was able to throw another one against the wall, pulling him back up to the platform. I showed it in White Acropolis, but in both games, if Sonic throws a sky gem against a wall, he gets a huge burst of speed into the air. It's not as severe in PO6 as it is in Retail, and also in PO6 if your angle is bad, it can spike you downward instead. But it's a great tool to have for those oh shit moments like this one. Anyway, Nick instead opts to follow the level design rather than try the trick again. But sadly, 06 decides to be 06 for a moment, leading to a death. And the worst part, Nick's route didn't grab any checkpoints, so he has to play the whole section again. This was a massive advantage for me, but anything can happen, so let's continue on. Section 3 in PO6 is what I deem to be a pinnacle example of high-speed platforming. It's not the fastest Sonic's ever gone, but it's still quick, has a great amount of flow, and feels very Sonic-y jumping on and through pieces of debris. It's so good. This section normally ends by transforming into Super Sonic with the Rainbow Gem, an unused item from Retail which you can get in PO6 by earning all the S ranks in Sonic's story. The transformation takes 3 seconds to play out and kills all of our speed, so anytime we use Super Sonic, it has to save more time than base Sonic would overall. This is why we don't use it in Wave Ocean's Mach Speed. As that section relies mostly on automation and cutting corners, Super Sonic's greater top speed isn't as useful there, unlike Crisis Cities where it's just a straight line. The invincibility helps to not get pot shot too. A unique thing happened in this run though. I hit the gem button at the same moment Sonic hit the dash panel, which takes priority. So the game bugs out for a minute, showing the transformation camera without Sonic actually transforming. So as a backup, on the third chain jump against the truck, I canceled the sequence, transformed into Super, then jump dashed back onto the chain jump trigger to continue the automation into the next part of the stage. A neat trick, but also a bit of a tease for something we'll see in Retail 06 later. Getting back on track, Section 3 in Retail isn't much different compared to a casual run, and Nick doesn't have the luxury of Super Sonic for Mach Speed, so he has to be careful to not take too much damage. On top of the already stiff controls, in Retail, Mach Speed Sonic gets hurt from coming into contact with any object. And on top of that, some objects in this section that are thrown around by the tornado will break apart, some into a million little pieces, all of which damage the poor hedgehog. This part of the stage is infamous, but thankfully Nick was able to navigate it mostly unscathed. Okay, now that's just cheating. Even though he died, before the death fade out, a character's body can still hit event triggers. And since he was so close to the goal ring, Sonic's corpse just flew right into it, completing the stage anyway. God, this game is beautiful. It's actually a good thing too, because dying here sets the tornado further back on the results screen, reducing lag. Time to dash into my favorite stage of the run, Flame Core. While so much of my affection comes from the music, with its latter track being my favorite in the franchise, the movement in PO6 complements the level design so well. Both sections are pretty linear, but especially with the blue gem, there's a great rhythm to it with some fun corner cuts along the way. I even use a newer strat on the lava river, taking advantage of a maxed out blue gem, which for whatever reason, when activated on the lava, causes Sonic to ignore its sinking properties and run at full speed on it. It's freaking sick. Section 2 is a tad more mundane, with the Knuckles part that utilizes all of his new combat prowess in the remake to glide into 5 orbs that Sonic could hit anyway if we played as him. Awesome. Retail is fairly tame too. A spin dash clip through a door here, a sky gem out of bounds there, a spin kick out of bounds there, and a sky gem out of bounds here gets Nick to the goal ring. Hard to believe that 3 out of bounds clips in the same stage is tame in this context. Radical Train in Retail does a lot of the same things as Flame Core, using door clips and sky gems for most of it. The big loop at the beginning is taken advantage of by placing Sonic off the normal path, which gives him the speed from the scripting, but then is thrown off into a wall where Nick can use a sky gem to land on the platform a little faster. He also only has to hit the first switch to save the civilian train, as Sonic's fast enough to get to Section 2 before it blows up on the other parts. PO6, on the other hand, isn't so lucky. Sonic actually has to save the civilians all 3 times like he's a hero or something, using the blue and purple gems along with a little sky gem to navigate the level in between. And, of course, a transformation into Super Sonic for the Mach Speed section. Part 2 is pretty much the same. I just don't have to worry about the train cars that blow up during the chase. The second and final Princess stage isn't as thrilling as the first, even with 2 sections. Part 1 is mostly automation, so both games navigated in a similar fashion, with a clip out during the log set piece for Retail, saving quite a bit of time as it's pretty long, especially in PO6's case. Section 2 has a little variance. In PO6, we use multiple different routes all combined together to go as fast as possible. Starting on the low route, jumping to a rail on the middle route, going back to the low route, then hitting the springs at the end of the top route to get to the goal ring, all while watching the action gauge carefully to not run out of shield energy and fall into a watery grave. In Retail, Sonic's action gauge actually works properly for this playstyle, but doesn't drain as quickly nor have the activation costs like PO6. So the best method is to just pitch down the camera and walk to the end. It ends up being the fastest route because this section has a lot of lag. Time for the big one, Kingdom Valley. Section 1 uses the same route in both games, with PO6 being quicker by virtue of Sonic actually being faster and having more Sonic-like physics for slope launches and stuff. Shows how remarkably good this level design is with its compactness without feeling claustrophobic to accommodate 06's slower speed and openness to interweave between multiple routes to find the fastest path through the level. Oh, I'm keeping take one. That's a wild sentence. And PO6 amplifies this with its movement system. Damn near perfection for Sonic, I must say. Switching to Silver in Section 2, we use 2 of his new PO6 upgrades, the Lotus of Resilience and ESP mode, to do some really long teleport dashes to the end of his part, where we switch back to Sonic and ride the Eagle to Section 3. In Retail, Sonic gives a giant middle finger to Silver and takes the Thanos approach, just doing the section himself. He's got his own story, it's fine to skip him here. The beginning of Section 3 is navigated in basically the same way, except that Retail can jump off the Eagle early and do some Green Gem Sky Gem shenanigans to skip the first tower. But all that changes when we get to the castle set piece. Both Retail and PO6 are able to skip it, but go about it very differently. In PO6's case, we start by running through the beginning of Section 3 with the Rainbow Gem equipped, and while that's technically a little slower than the Blue Gem, we want to level the Rainbow Gem up to max. Outside of Mach speed sections, Supersonic gains new abilities with each gem level, getting increased speed and jump height at level 2, then unlocking the Arrow of Light at level 3. With it, Supersonic can do this move to get a huge dash forward, which is critical for the skip and costs the entire action gauge. When transformed, Supersonic can't utilize the other gems, as since it's intended to be a weaker version of the yellow guy by lead developer ChaosX, he needs to keep the Rainbow Gem equipped along with rings to maintain the state. Since the gems are easily swappable and offer more extreme powers versus the jack-of-all-trades Supersonic is, it's much better to stay in Sonic's base form to have access to them. Except for here, as he makes the skip faster and we have to transform into him anyway for the Mach speed section. So, with a fully powered up Rainbow Gem and over 50 rings, we bounce Sonic off of the first rope, homing attack our way to the rope across from it, use both jump dashes to destroy the first tower, then Blue Gem jump to the second tower, transform into Supersonic, jump, which gets the extra jump height from leveling up the gem, then perform the Arrow of Light to reach the platform beyond the set piece. For Retail, the setup starts the same as PO6, except Nick instead grabs the Eagle circling above the spring to the automation, jumps off of it, uses the Green Gem to destroy the tower and stall himself in the air, lands on the tower as it's falling, which you can't do in PO6, then homing attacks to the invisible chain jump trigger, which is still there even though the tower is gone. And after the chain jumps, Spin Dash clips through the door. For all of their differences, I'm happy to say that both Retail 06 and PO6 are awesome speed games with really cool tricks. Speaking of similarities, the final Mach speed section is basically the same, except that we enact peak fiction in PO6's case. The writer said to use that to connect with the youth. The penultimate stage of the run is appropriately one of the toughest. When playing PO6 at a high level, or imitating high level play in my case, Aquatic Base is an incredibly linear stage with several tight jumps to skip set pieces when possible. It all comes down to the movement, and every second counts. The roughest part is the post-Knuckles section, where again we use his amazing new combat to glide over everything and reach the switch. I know it's going to be updated, I just love poking fun at it. And, using the gems, we can avoid riding the ball. And if you want to go really fast, only use the Blue Gem. This method requires landing very precisely on a laser pillar right after a previous dash. We have to let go of the control stick at the right time to slow Sonic down in the air, then pray we land on the pillar to then Blue Gem off it and through the door. Oh, and for Retail, Aquatic Base is merely a suggestion. Like Flame Core, Sky Gemming and Spin Dash clipping destroys this stage, bypassing Tails' section entirely in Part 1, and of course skipping Knuckles in Part 2. But we're not done yet. Tails has his own version of Wave Ocean, and it's kinda boring. Though the Fox is quite fun to play as in the project, the level isn't really designed with his flight in mind, so he just kinda sails over everything with little effort, way more slowly than Sonic does. In Retail, some dash panel scripting can be used yet again to get a ton of speed, fling Tails over some loops, then quickly fly to keep it even longer and reach the rail right before the boardwalk. Then after some standard platforming, we reach the part where we played as the yellowish guy in Sonic's Wave Ocean, which in PO6 we accomplished the exact same way by feathering our flight over the ocean to go straight to the goal ring. In Retail, Nick is actually able to throw out a dummy ring bomb and stand on it for a moment to get some flight back, as unlike PO6, it's timed and doesn't refresh until he stands on something like Sonic Adventure. This is absolutely hilarious and a great way to end the run. Unfortunately for Nick, I had finished the story about 5 minutes ago, just as he was entering Aquatic Base. I wasn't sure how big of a factor the load times were to the outcome of the race, so just for fun, I calculated the load's remove time for each of us. PO6's run was approximately 24 minutes and 15 seconds, while Retail's run was 23 minutes and 58 seconds. While the loads only accounted for 1 minute and a half in my run, it was over 7 minutes for Nick. Considering the mistakes he made, Retail easily clears PO6 in completion time. Thank goodness the loads were on my side. This race also gave me the idea that I think PO6 could allow the characters to stand on more objects in the game. Things like the guillotine poles and Kingdom Valley towers, they just slide right off them normally, but could potentially be used for some fun routing like it is in Retail. Nothing crazy like standing on your own bombs though. On to Shadow's story. In 3, 2, 1... let's go! The opening stage, White Acropolis, highlights the main gameplay difference between the two 06s, Shadow's base movement. In Project 06, he controls almost identically to Gemless Sonic, which means we have access to the awesome spam dash to keep up the speed. Though, Shadow is actually 2 units of speed slower than the blue guy, and 4 units slower at max spin dash speed, some ultimate life form. His jump dash also works exactly the same as Sonic's, and with the fan game's customizable types, we are of course using Legacy just like Sonic does, and it's actually more important for his run as we'll see in the coming stages. In Retail 06, Shadow doesn't have the spin dash, and given the game's low top speed for most characters, Nick's going to be doing a lot of this. Shadow's jump dash is actually longer than Sonic's in the OG game, and it's actually not a glitch, sorry for that misinformation, I thought it was with what I knew at the time, so it's a pretty cool way to differentiate them. In PO6, they go the same distance regardless of the type though, but it'd be cool to add it back in Chaos, wink wink nudge nudge. Back to the stage, on the PO6 side, the Snowy Peak is a fast-paced spin dash down the slopes with a jump or two to avoid some laser gates. We then spin dash jump to the switch, go through the door, and use the tornado kick to very quickly take out the enemies to open the portal. Don't worry, I'll be talking about this move later, but for now, just know it destroys foes very fast. In Retail, Nick's doing lots of until he gets to the door. Seems pretty unfair with how quickly PO6 Shadow can move versus here, but in OG, the Faker has a huge trick up his sleeve. The ability to make not just doors, but also walls a suggestion. Introducing pause clipping. When Shadow's up against 2 walls, the more vertical the better, you can jump and pause the game at the same time, hopefully on the first frame of the jump. If successful, spamming A to continue the game and immediately jump dashing after causes Shadow to go through the collision. As you can no doubt guess, this is an extremely useful tool for his stages. So Nick gets to save just a little bit of time on PO6 by not having to grab the switch to open the door. We see a difference in the 2 games again with our main Hog's Chaos attack, the 5-hit combo he does after homing attacking an enemy. In PO6, Shadow's combo ends once the enemy is defeated, but in Retail, if Shadow homing attacks a 1-hit point enemy, he can then initiate his Chaos attack to target the next nearest one. This is what's happening here, and on top of that, the red robot is a leader, a mechanic in both 06s where in certain groups of enemies, defeating the elite type will also destroy the ones around it, opening the portal to Section 2 for Nick. After a short gliding section with Rouge at the start of the base, both games switch back to Shadow. The goal here is to destroy all 5 searchlights. In Retail, Nick does this by hopping into a nearby buggy and sniping them with the shots. The missiles have a really long range before they explode, so he can hit them all from the spawn point with proper positioning. And while the result screens are normally just faster in Retail than they are in PO6, Nick can speed up this one even more by triggering a text box right as it appears, avoiding the victory animation and fading to black super fast. For PO6, the buggy's in a super out of the way location, but thankfully, the team designed it to where just the searchlight bulbs can be destroyed in order to beat the stage, which Shadow can reach with just his homing attack. This route to destroy the 5 searchlights is my one contribution to PO6 speedrunning, which I developed back when the Shadow release was new in 2021. Still pretty proud of it. This route also highlights Shadow's air action, the Chaos Spear. In his base form, the Hog can shoot up to 5 projectiles that stun enemies, or charge them up to their yellow variant to do 1 point of damage. This can destroy the searchlight bulbs from afar too, so it's pretty cool. Shadow can throw up to 3 spears before either having to touch the ground or homing attack something in order to refresh them, and this move has 2 cool consequences because of it. Firstly, after a throw, the experiment does a small aerial recovery, gaining a bit of height, which is called a spear bounce. This can be chained with subsequent throws to give Shadow what is essentially a super controllable double jump, which will be used a lot throughout the run. Also, Shadow's able to refresh his jump dash if he uses a spear after performing his first one. This can only be done once per 3 spears though. A very cool glitch turned feature of this is pressing the jump dash and spear button at the same time, which skips the spear animation while still getting the second jump dash, called the double homing attack. This is super useful for maintaining Shadow's airspeed, as using a Chaos Spear grinds him to a halt, and is very neat tech, especially when combined with the Legacy type. Unfortunately, this feature is going to be removed in the next release of PO6, but Beats came up with a pretty cool idea to sort of maintain its functionality by having the Chaos Spear be a cancelable action, kinda like how Sonic's bound attack is. So hopefully it makes it through to the final product. I'm really pushing for it. Now that we're familiar with some of Shadow's strats in both games, and PO6 PO6 being slightly ahead of Retail in the race, let's continue on into Kingdom Valley. The Old Castle's opening section puts us in a hang glider in both games, which is on rails in Retail and free range in PO6. Make no mistake though, even in the fan project it's still pretty linear. The only piece of tech here is holding A to move faster, and double tapping it every 3 seconds to get a short boost. I would love it in PO6 if there was some visual feedback when the boost gets refreshed, like a little flash on both of the boosters or something. Once we arrive at the lake, we take control of Rouge once again to do some treasure hunting. While in Retail the keys are in set locations, PO6 gives us the Adventure 1 radar system and 2 extra locations for each key to be in addition to their Retail placements. While there's a 1 in 27 chance to get the best set, I still got a pretty decent one, and grabbing all 3 switches us back to Shadow to open the door to the hover car section. Did I just say door? Well, you know what Retail's doing then. This part's just a straight shot across the water to the springs and the Eagle in both games. Though in Project 06 we can stop for a quick greeting to Chaos 0. In Section 3, this route's actually pretty similar in both cases. In Retail we get to see our first instance of pause clipping through 2 walls instead of a door to skip a part of the first tower, whereas PO6 uses Chaos Spears and the jump dash to cross the gap instead. Pause clipping also has another use. If you do it into certain dash panels, you can go way above the speed limit and really zoom, which is what Nick's doing here. After the spring spiral, we go up a huge slope and see yet another feature of the tornado kick, maintaining the speed of dash panels. This move does slow us down slightly each time we use it, unlike Sonic's spin kick though, so in this case it's not as useful as the blue guy's move. In Retail, Shadow actually has an extra ability, the edge attack. No joke, that's actually what it's called, which replaces the tornado kick when the hog is moving. It's identical to Sonic's spin kick, so it retains his speed really well. After a bit of platforming and a rail grind on Retail's side, while we destroy some towers on PO6's side, both Shadows complete Kingdom Valley. PO6 is still ahead at this point, especially considering the original game's load times with Nick playing off his 360, but with Shadow's toolkit in Retail being what it is, with more to come, he still has more than enough time to close the distance. Off to Crisis City. The town on fire begins with a really cool spin dash section for PO6, and a buggy ride in Retail. While both are pretty fast, the buggy blew up early for Nick, so he has to do more to get to the end. This is one of my favorite parts of Shadow's story in the fan game. It's so fun rolling down these slopes. Section 2 has some pretty standard movement for the majority of it in both games, until the end. On Retail's side, Nick will be performing the lamb sauce, which I'll leave to him to explain.
From what Gordon has told me, he was looking for a strat in Crisis City regarding rock launches, and there was a chatter in his stream that was like, the next strat you find should be called lamb sauce, and it just so happened to be a rock launch in Crisis City. So yeah, you break out of the automation here, and then you go towards this rock, which is conveniently laid out. We got it, let's go.
Nice! In PO6, we get to utilize Shadow's Chaos Boost level 1, granting him the Chaos Snap. While mostly meant for combat purposes, with him now teleporting between enemies and doing extra damage with the Chaos attack, it does have a platforming use. During a jump dash, if a new homing target comes into range while it's active, Shadow will still warp to it, allowing him to actually reach things that seem out of range. This is used more mundanely early on in the section to cross a big gap, but the final stretch is the big one, and it's the hardest trick in the game. To set it up, we homing attack this item box, use the legacy jump dash into the ground to gain a bunch of speed, then a quick spin dash to gain even more speed. Follow it up with a deceptively precise jump against the camera around the building toward the final rail, then spear, jump dash, spear, spear for a little extra distance, then a final jump dash into snap to get onto the final rail. It's so easy to mess up this trick because with the camera's perspective, it's hard to tell if Shadow's too low for the snap to reach the rail or not, so you kind of have to feel it out and pray for the best. The funny part is that this trick is basically free if you turn off the camera volumes in the options menu, which disables most of the camera pans in the stages and keeps it behind the character. I prefer running with them on though in every other stage, so I'm fine taking the 2-second loss here. Though this skip might not be possible with them on in the last release with some potential changes to the spin dash, but I'm holding out hope. Anywho, Section 3 is super easy in both games, with Retail being a scripted hang glider sequence and PO6 having a small gap between the debris and the kill plane, making it a straight shot. Finally, Section 4 of Crisis City, a unique section Sonic doesn't travel through, is super execution heavy other than Retail being able to do a rock launch similar to the lamb sauce in Section 2. Nick got unlucky with it though, so he had to play through the section normally. We get a break from the craziness for a bit in Flame Core. PO6 plays it the standard way but fast, and we get to see our first instance of Shadow's 100% reward, the Memory Shard Light. This little nugget allows Shadow to supercharge his Chaos Boost when he's collected enough energy cores from enemies to reach a 4th level of it. The abilities level 2 and 3 grant aren't useful in speedruns in either game, so we just ignore them. Thanks to the surplus of enemies on the first combat plateau and the gauge up capsules, which instantly fill the Hog's action gauge and maturity meter, allowing him to level up instantly, we can activate uninhibited mode. This cutscene ability turned gameplay feature is essentially Shadow's pseudo super form, granting him invincibility, being able to one-shot any enemy, boosting his Chaos Spear into a 5-shot lance that can OHKO enemies from a distance, and other things that aren't important to the speedrun. Just like Chaos Boost, it drains his action gauge, though super quickly compared to level 1, and if it runs out, he gets stunned for 6 seconds to recover. Thankfully, you can extend the time of uninhibited mode by collecting more energy cores from defeated enemies, which Flame Core has plenty of, so it's no issue maintaining the state. The devs of PO6 were also very generous in not giving Shadow the 6-second penalty if he's in automation or grinding on rails, so ideally we would want to be in one of those two states when the action gauge runs out, as it's hard to maintain in Section 2. But if that's not the case, we can just restart the section to still save some time, which is what happened here because I collected an extra core in Section 1. Shadow doesn't have this upgrade in retail, so Nick utilizes the Chaos Snap, which is a very silly ability in its original incarnation. For the casual player, it can be quite frustrating as all it seems to do is gimp your jump dash and randomly teleport you to enemies sometimes. But what's actually happening here is holding A during a jump dash charges and stores a snap, which is what's going on when Shadow stops in the air here. If you want to use your normal jump dash, just tap and release A instead. Now, your next homing attack will be a snap, which can be used to teleport past walls and doors if there's a homing target on the other side, like Nick does here. Chaos Snap doesn't do this in PO6 because Shadow still has to be able to see the target in order to home in on it, indicated by the reticle if that option's turned on. As for the speedrunner, Chaos Snap is actually, seriously, the most complex and remarkably consistent Sonic ability in the franchise. Our good friend Gordon Ramsay has a 2006-ish word explanation with video guides on how this move works. It's crazy. But for our purposes, Chaos Snap is used to get Nick past the door on the second combat plateau, as it's the only one in the game he can't pause clip through. Strange. In Section 2, PO6 takes advantage of Shadow beginning in the air by using the Chaos Spear to keep him there, then jump dashing over to the rail to skip going all the way around the room. Then we grab the invincibility box, allowing us to do a goofy interaction on this golem where after a homing attack, instead of doing the Chaos attack, we just let Shadow do it to him as the invincibility finishes it off, opening the door. The Sparkles of Doom also stops the lava from slowing us down, so in the next room, instead of going around, we can just spin dash up the lava fall straight to the switch. Following that, we switch to Rouge to hit some orbs, then back to Shadow, we do a cool cage spin dash with him, using the slope of the box to skyrocket upward, which helps us reach the end of the stage a bit quicker. But retail gets a little silly. In the OG game, rails and loops for some reason have an absurd number of Chaos Snap targets specifically, so Nick grabs the Gauge Up capsule to power up to level 1, readies a snap, attempts to homing attack the rail, and... Don't worry, he's come back before. This is the same principle used in the Mach Speed section of Sonic's Crisis City, where the character's corpse can still interact with objects even after dying. The game doesn't know where to put Shadow when he snaps on the rail due to the 10 to the power of bajillion rail snapping targets, so it just sends him to the origin of the stage, hitting a kill plane, and Nick sets the angle so that Shadow's lifeless body flings into the checkpoint, respawning him there and skipping a good chunk of the section. Wow! From there, Nick performs an out-of-bounds clip in Rouge's section to get to the goal ring, and here I thought pause clipping was the craziest thing Shadow can do. Don't worry, it makes a return in Radical Terrain, as Shadow can clip through the doors to not have to destroy Eggman's locomotive. This puts the section on a pretty strict time limit of 55 seconds, as the Rotund Doctor will get away if you don't get to Section 2 fast enough. In PO6, we play through it the standard way, taking full advantage of the absurd power of the Tornado Kick to defeat enemies and damage the train very quickly. To bring everyone up to speed with this move, as I've gone into detail with it many times on this channel, this Whirlwind of Destruction is the most overpowered move in the game. The hitbox of the kick is a sphere around Shadow that gets increased range 2 additional times by hitting the B button again, has a constant hitbox similar to the spin dash, does 2 points of damage per hit, the beefiest foe in the game has 6 health for reference, can be used on the move, and is part of base Shadow's kit. It's super broken, but it's being rebalanced along with some buffs coming to his other skills in the last release to even out the playing field and bring more variety to his combat. But for now, we can take advantage of its absurd power for the latter half of the game. Section 2 of the train yard is similar in both 06s, get on the bike, destroy the train, which only takes a few bullets in retail compared to PO6. We also use the Easter egg in PO6 that while Shadow is in Chaos Boost, he has infinite ammo on his vehicles, speeding up this part a bit. Welcome to Tornado Kick the Stage. While Aquatic Base has great music and a cool motif with a purple hue for Shadow denoting his pursuit of Mephiles, it's my least favorite stage in PO6. The level design is boring, the enemies go down insanely fast due to the Cyclone of Death, these purple worms are the ones with 6 health by the way, and the little bit of interesting platforming that there is done by Silver. Looking at it more, there's some cool platforming in the linear room after switching from silver, in which we also take advantage of his action gauge filling naturally to transfer it to Shadow and immediately go into Chaos Boost to set up for later. This part's pretty neat, avoiding the balls, snapping to the guys. I wish there was more of this. I guess because casually in retail, Shadow is so slow they felt the long narrow corridors wouldn't be good for him? Who knows? Regardless, Section 2 isn't much better. In fact, it's worse. It's a truncated and watered down, version of Sonic's, with the only saving grace being a cool fight room with uninhibited mode at the end. But that's all it's got going for it. On retail side, Section 1 of course has doors, so I'll let it speak for itself. Section 2 at least has a bike to speed things up, so Shadow doesn't have to do a bunch of... And a somewhat interesting fight route in the final room with Chaos Snap, because while Shadow can clip through doors, the goal ring doesn't spawn until all the enemies are defeated. With that Section 1 though, he saved a bunch of time over PO6. Wave Ocean starts us in a hang glider section in both games, which, fun fact, Shadow can completely avoid in PO6, though it's slower, and gives us a chance to question our reality. In the fan game, Section 2 is pretty standard, showcasing our first instance of Omega, whom we'll be seeing a lot more in the next level. Here we just shoot a couple enemies Sonic Adventure 2 style and hover our way into the Shadow section. This part's actually been expanded in PO6 to have more platforming before entering the hover car, and it's got some pretty sweet movement. The highlights are jumping against the slope terrain, which in the fan project, if for some reason gives you a bunch of extra height, please don't remove this chaos, it's really cool, allowing us to skip defeating the enemies on this peninsula. We then chain jump dashes into this destructible rock, which in both PO6 and retail, destroying objects with a jump dash refreshes it, so we get to chain 2 more to get to the end island here. Then we hop into the hover car, give Rouge a quick hello, then finish the stage. For retail, Nick takes advantage of Omega being super broken, being the character with the fastest ground speed, yes, even above Sonic, and having a hover which allows you to maintain your altitude if you mash the button and has no limit. This allows him to fly around the invisible wall and hit the spring to finish the stage with the robot. Hitting the spring is important as it makes Omega face the wrong way in the results screen, which reduces the lag on console significantly compared to normal. Also, fun fact, Omega's grind trick, you know, the thing that you do on rails to give yourself a little extra speed, his does nothing, other than give him a few style points, I guess. The move for all characters can be pretty confusing already, as you have to tap the X button to a specific rhythm that doesn't align with the animation to get the speed boost at all, but this is the cherry on top. Thankfully, our robot friend here only has one grind rail to worry about, so it's not a big deal. But this game just keeps on giving, man, I swear. Dusty Desert actually has a way to skip Section 1 in both games. For PO6, the trigger to open the door to the temple is actually next to this breakable wall near it, so we can skip the pillars entirely and just hover straight to it to continue on. For Nick, he has to fly to the door in a certain way to get the hover car to flip over. This destroys it, allowing Shadow to stand on the sand in front of the door to pause clip through it, as for some reason the sand is a solid rather than a liquid like the rest of the dunes. My ass still hurts from that. Nick could just sit there and let the enemies pelt the hover car until it blows up. But it dies way faster by flipping it, as the game doesn't let Shadow hop out of the vehicle on his own. Inside the ruins in PO6, it's criminal to call this Shadow's Dusty Desert because after a tornado kick in a sand wave room, we switch to Omega for majority of the section. But on the bright side, we get to utilize his improvements in the remake, like his faster hover speed, melee combo, being able to shoot on the move defeating the hordes of enemies, along with a new ability inspired by his cutscene with Mephiles, Gatling gun mode to really lay on the pain and hit a switch from afar. Switching back to Shadow, we go through what I dub the worst room in the game, where even when taking the fastest route, it still feels sluggish and one mess up results in a ton of time loss, then tornado kick another group of enemies, and finally spin dash our way down the tubes to the end. For retail, this section has doors and walls, so our good buddy Pause Clipping comes back to completely skip Omega, as the room you switch back to Shadow in is just to the left of the initial sand room, making Dusty Desert a very short stage. But of course, that's not the end, because we have one more stage with Rouge in Tropical Jungle. PO6 turns this area into a key hunt, though only 2 of the keys are randomized this time, with the third one always being in a box near the end. So, with 3 unique locations for 2 of the keys, we have a 1 in 9 chance to get the best set, which of course I didn't hit, then defeat the enemies at the end for the last key and hit the goal ring to finish the run. For retail, Nick can just glide to the end of the stage since there's no keys to find, though in classic 06 fashion, he can do a couple glitches to speed it up. When climbing into a corner, Rouge freaks out and climbs up very fast, which he can use to get to a high vantage point quickly. Then, if you stop Rouge's glide into the ground at the right time, her fancy ending animation can cause her to skyrocket into the air, called a moon jump, allowing her to get over the lasers and hit the goal rig, 3-ish minutes after I had already completed the game. Yeah, P06 won in the real time again, but of course that doesn't tell the full story. Removing the loads, P06 was completed in approximately 22 minutes and 31 seconds, respectable, while Retail finished in approximately 20 minutes and 48 seconds, meaning that the loads accounted for 6 minutes of its run versus 50 seconds for the remake, which makes the current score 2-0 on the real time for P06 and 2-0 on the game time for Retail. Yeah, that loading's really saving my ass. On to Silver's story. Since Silver controls quite a bit differently than his brethren, speedrunners of the original game have found a way to bust his story wide open with a little trick called the telethrow, which I'll leave to Nick to explain.
When you stand on an object with Silver, with the right trigger, if you hold that, you'll lift up to a height cap, and if you press X, normally, he will jump off of the object and it will throw towards something he's aiming at. However, if you're standing on it at a slope and you lift it to the height cap and you throw, you get to stay on the object as it's being thrown. So you get to ride the object while it's being thrown, and you can direct it wherever you want to go. And it's way faster than Silver's normal movement.
In other words, fuck P06. Ready? No? Well, too bad. Welcome to the Sonic 06 versus P06 Silver race. In 3, 2, 1, let's go! Taking off into Crisis City, P06 utilizes a few new abilities Silver has in the fan project. Since speedruns of the game are done on New Game Plus, we can collect the upgrades ahead of time and utilize them throughout the run. Look, I understand it's Sonic 06, but I was literally setting up this clip to go buy things from the shop, and Blaze just fucking dies. She just dies. Like, why did that happen? The route through the fiery streets begins immediately with some badnik bounces, something the Spiky Boy can only do with the Lotus of Resilience. Then we use a lizard on the crumbling road ahead to get a small jump and teleport dash all the way to the fallen skyscraper. This is the other ability of the Lotus, lengthening Silver's teleport dashes to use up the whole action gauge rather than a set amount, including if it were to refill while we're airborne. This will come into play later on in the run. Then we run to the other side of the building, letting the energy cores catch up so we can activate ESP mode. This is the not super form Silver gets in P06 from the Sigil of Awakening, which only appears after getting an S rank in every stage of his campaign. It does a ton of stuff, but for right now we just need it for the reduced action gauge cost, allowing the Silver guy to fly all the way from the skyscraper to the broken landmass farther in, skipping a good chunk of the level. From here, we badnik bounce again up to a rune, then activate it and animation cancel off of it so we can get a huge slope jump and land on the lifted objects as they're moving, getting Silver to the girder a bit faster. After that, it's just some hovering and teleport dashing to the next section. In Retail, Nick runs to the nearest liftable object and...
The building's knocked over.
So this is how it's gonna be, isn't it? In Section 2, we switch to Blaze and take advantage of her Fire Claw to skip a good chunk of the level after the jump panels. Then we use her Restored Claw attack, which will be removed in the next version of P06 Rest in Peace, to cut through the enemies, then double jump and Fire Claw our way to Section 3. Retail skips Blaze by flying around the trigger. This is possible because Nick skipped grabbing the Shock Bracelet when setting up the save file, which allows him to do the Levitation Extension trick. With the Psycho Smash gone, if you hold X the frame after a hover ends, Silver maintains his speed and, as long as X is held, refills his action gauge mid-air. You'll see how useful this is. With our companion successfully skipped, Silver hops on a rock and telethrows to the end of the section. Section 3 is a bit of a nothing burger, though this is the only time in the game where you start in one part of the stage, leave to another one, then return to the previous one, as this is the other half of Section F. So we just teleport dash on P06's side and telethrow on Retail's side to get to the end. You know, this telethrowing stuff, it looks kind of fun. I'm gonna give it a try.
Come on, what did you think was gonna happen?
Finishing up the opening stage, Retail starts strong and is ahead of P06. Let's see if Nick can keep this up. Tropical Jungle is an incredibly dense stage with many mechanics like dropping the fruit into the turtle's mouth in order to ride it, activating runes to break down barriers or hit balls, vine swinging to reach new areas, and is jam-packed with multiple routes and shortcuts. It must have taken ages for both the programmers at Sonic Team to make and the P06 devs to replicate all the things they put here. Yeah, the swamp is destroyed with the teleport dash on P06 PO6's side and the telethrow on 06's side. Retail actually has a pretty tough setup for it, as Nick has to push a box so that it's at an angle when he lifts it so he can properly influence its direction. As for PO6, the route is pretty cool as you fly underneath most of the stage, then use one of the log rams to gain a bunch of height to get to the end. And that's it, just a single section. While infamous casually, both games actually have a relatively easy time with Dusty Desert. The billiards behave much better in PO6, going mostly where you want them to and having their global countdown timer removed. After we defeat the initial enemy waves, utilizing the Psychic Knife, which is gained from Silver's final new upgrade in PO6, the Flame of Control, we pop ESP mode before the balls fall into the table to save some time. As in the next room, we again use the reduced action gauge costs while grabbing a gauge up capsule midair to instantly refill it, bringing us to the switch and changing over to dun dun dun. Don't worry, in this game, Amy is significantly more fun to play as, and even that's an understatement, with a returning hammer jump and overall improved acrobatics. Because folks have such a fun time playing as her in the remake, Chaos actually extended her section a bit, now having to climb to the top of the tower room instead of just lunging across it, and doing a little bit more platforming here and there to squeeze out as much game time with the pink hedgehog as possible. As with basically all the other amigos, I hope the team takes some creative liberties and gives Amy more appearances in the last release, as right here in her White Acropolis End of the World section just aren't enough. After switching back to Silver, we fly through another sand room, then see another aspect of ESP mode, the ESP Blast, which on activation of the state defeats any enemies surrounding the hog in a pretty decent radius. And while the balls are already better to slap around, the final puzzle was made easier with some non-breakable walls and ramps added, along with the final hole pulling the ball in if it's nearby and flushing it down. For 06, since we're inside this time, you may be thinking that the telethrow won't be useful. Oh, what a sweet, naive child you are. One of the most popular tricks for casuals in retail is taking a box to the final door of the ball puzzle and uplifting next to it so Silver clips through the top of the door and can go straight to the goal ring without having to worry about the stupid billiard. Naturally, this principle can be used on any door in the stage, so Nick takes a pot from the first room and uses the door frame to turn it upside down, giving him a flat surface since there aren't any square boxes around here, and lifts Silver into the door frame, taking him out of bounds. Then Nick uses the sand waves of the next room to push the pot out of bounds with him, then telethrows through the void to the end. And this isn't even the craziest part of the run. Since I have had to basically play every stage in full and Nick, well, doesn't, he keeps his lead 3 stages in. But can 06 keep it going? Eggman's snowy base begins by forcing us to play with Blaze. And oh my god, Retail actually has to play a section. Well, almost. The hot-headed feline is able to clip through the laser gate at the beginning, and with a precise setup, at the end of the stage is able to transfer the speed of a dash panel into her spinning claw attack, which maintains its speed and allows her to clip through the final door. Section 1 in PO6 is largely the same, just faster thanks to the remake's improved control. No clipping through doors here though. Section 2 is pretty straightforward. We get to take advantage of teleport dash slope jumping off of some rocks to get to a platform and fly over the laser wall. Then float across the tundra, perform another slope jump, and hit the goal ring, with Retail catching up with some telethrows now that Nick's in control of Silver again. The Loco Locomotive Train Yard is another short one. Don't ask how many times it took to say that, as it's only one section as well. Man, they really banked on how slow Silver was here, didn't they? In PO6, there's a hidden gauge up capsule in the firebox to the right of our spawn, which fills up our action gauge and maturity meter instantly. It's important when speedrunning Silver in PO6 to take note of the maturity meter the entire run, but I haven't mentioned it till now since the beginning of this video was already chock full of mechanics to explain. That's kinda just how Silver is. Anyway, for Sonic and Shadow, the maturity meter is more of an experience bar that allows them to level up their abilities, but for Silver, it's a resource for ESP mode. Once the meter is filled to the white mark or above, you can activate the state. But the catch is that while it's active, collecting more energy cores or gauge up capsules won't fill it back up. So you often have to make the choice on whether you want to activate ESP mode for a little bit to get a quick shortcut or destroy a bunch of enemies with the blast, or wait until it's more filled up to have the benefits of the power up for longer. It's a really cool system that makes you think about when and where to use ESP mode rather than just having it active all the time. That being said, the gauge up capsule fills the meter to max and we don't have to think about any of that. Whee! After destroying the first barricade, we get to see another new effect of ESP mode, reflecting enemy projectiles. Silver actually isn't invincible in this state and will take touch damage if we get too close, so we still have to be somewhat careful. Using this, we can block the flying robot's missiles and Badnik bounce off of him over the train bridge and land on the rail on the other side. Silver, and all the characters for that matter, are actually able to grind in both Retail and PO6. It's just that the rails themselves have to be programmed in order to do so, which they weren't in the OG games version of this stage. After teleport dashing off the final cable and destroying the last barrier, Radical Train is complete for PO6. Now for Retail.
Iblis Trigger, get away!
You gotta be kidding me. Probably the most hilarious example of the telethrow in 06 is using the shovel that leans against the firebox at the beginning of the stage. As long as Nick aims it right, which of course he does, he's the GOAT, he can ride that sexy spade all the way to the goal ring. Now for the gauntlet. The next 3 stages in both Retail and PO6 are significantly longer and a lot more difficult than the previous 5 have been, save for maybe Dusty Desert. So there's going to be a lot going on here. And by this point, PO6 is just barely ahead of 06 thanks to White Acropolis and load times, so I'm gonna have to put in a lot of work to keep my lead. Since Aquatic Base is also an indoor stage, Nick will unfortunately have to actually play it a little bit. Never mind. The universal rule of video games is that collision is a suggestion as long as you're going fast enough. And just like how Silver can extend his hover by holding X 1 frame after he stops hovering, the same can be done with the teleport dash, maintaining its much faster speed to allow clipping through the door at the beginning of the stage and fly out of bounds all the way to the section trigger. Just pressing the X button 1 frame after a teleport dash is called an extended teleport dash, or an ETD, and holding it like Nick does here is called the super extended teleport dash, or SETD. And no, they're not diseases. The SETD is only possible without Silver's shock bracelet power-up, just like levitation extensions. PO6, of course, doesn't have that luxury, and we instead have to go all the way around the first section to unlock a door, use ESP mode to fly very carefully through the big balls section, being careful to land on the pillars to refill our action gauge, or a farm, then make our way to section 2. But at the beginning, we got to play as Shadow for a little bit, so take that, Retail. Deeper into the base we go, and 06 actually plays it somewhat normally. I mean, Nick's still bending space-time in some parts, but he does ride the big balls for a little bit and has to do the combat at the end or else the goal ring won't spawn. PO6 continues its aura farming by activating ESP mode on top of the magnetic pole, defeating some faraway foes and collecting their energy cores as we teleport dash our way over the big ball section. After seeing some 3D in our 3D Sonic game, PO6 uses the Psychic Knife and 1 more ESP blast to take care of the final enemy wave and hit its goal ring. There are still more stages to go, but 06 regains its lead on PO6 thanks to that little trick in section 1, so I'm gonna have to make up quite a bit of ground in order to beat it. Ooh, this is exciting. Entering the ruined castle in PO6, we start by setting up a Badnik bounce into Psychic Knife to defeat the initial foes and throw a psychic shot that goes through certain walls to destroy the tower we teleport dash to. Then, using ESP mode, we fly over to a platform with a sentry bot on it, and use it to our advantage by waiting for our action gauge to fill, then use ESP's ability to auto-stun foes close to Silver to stun it, pick it up and crush it with Psychokinesis, then immediately teleport dash off the platform toward the broken bridge. That sentry bot and all the little guys around it individually drop their own energy cores, giving us a ton to use. But the teleport dash is a little too fast for them to catch up unless we somehow find a way to slow ourselves down. The combination of the left turn the Spiky Boy takes, plus hugging the wall slows him down enough for the cores to catch up while we're flying, extending his teleport dash time. Such a cool strat that we haven't seen the last of. Running up the staircase, we grab all the spike balls at the top, then jump and hover over to the wall with all the crabs on it, let go of the hover, and let the spike balls waterfall down and destroy all of them to unlock the way forward. Another one of my favorite tricks. Then, we throw a knife at the nearby enemies, activate ESP mode again, and fly toward the tower. After landing on the outcropping, we throw a psychic knife through the iron bars to kill one of the enemies inside. Initiate a teleport dash and turn around the left wall, with the energy core from the enemy we defeated flying into Silver and giving us just enough meter to make it to the platform. Then, just 2 more dashes to the Eagle and we're off to section 2. Probably the flashiest part of Silver's run as a whole in the fan project, lots of really tight timings, and if you fail, it's back to the beginning of the stage because there are no checkpoints along this route. They're all on the right side. Checking in on Retail, Nick showcases a new technique, the tele-launch. He first does a specific setup to trick the game into thinking Silver grabbed this rock at the start from far away even though he's standing on it, throws it, then uplifts it, which preserves the throwing speed and allows him to launch, oh, that's why it's called that, into the sky. Then do a super extended teleport dash to the section trigger. Well, sadly he missed it. It is a frame-perfect trick after all. But levitation extensions are a good backup, albeit a lot slower. Section 2 is quite a bit simpler. The Psycho Boy has to defeat a small group of enemies, but then we switch to Blue Guy! Woo! Sonic goes through basically an identical section to his Kingdom Valley, which means we can perform Castle Skip again. However, the route doesn't collect enough rings nor enough energy cores to get the Rainbow Gem to level 3 to do it with the yellow guy. So we instead collect 3 cores from the floating bots to level the purple gem to its second stage, then perform the jump off the second castle with the blue gem into 2 purple gem jumps to get to the other side. Then throw the hog off a cliff to switch back to Silver. What? Now, this method may seem faster than using Supersonic, and you're right. However, in the Blue Blur story, we have to take into account the Mach speed section as well. And using Supersonic from Castle Skip onward in his version of the stage saves time overall. Then with the Gray Man, sorry, I'm running out of names to use, we activate ESP mode, cross some towers, have the Eagle take us for a dip in the water. Hey man, careful, I'm allergic to that stuff, we're in a 3D game. Then one more ESP blast to finish off the stage. As for the original game, you know the drill by now. Nick grabs a box and telethrows to the end. Alright, the big one. Flame Core is probably the toughest stage in PO6 execution-wise. Kingdom Valley Section 1 comes close, as that's a you hit the tricks or you don't and you die, but that's just teleport dashing compared to all the different skills you have to use here. The fan game actually lengthens the intro with a small section where you play as Blaze, going through, or avoiding in our case, the loop set piece and whatnot. And after about 12 seconds of fireclawing and double jumping, we switch to Silver for the remainder of the stage. Please let us play as Blaze in Flame Core Section 1 Chaos, it'd be awesome. Anywho, once we switch to Silver, we do a teleport dash to a platform with an item box. These grounded ones are our best friends because once we let the action gauge fill a little, we can get a running start and slope jump off the base of the remaining capsule and hover our way to the upper platform. Sort of like the original game, you can slightly stagger Silver's hover to get a little extra distance, but it's nowhere near as spammable here as it is there. Then, after Badnik bouncing off the Iblis Golem and hit the springs, we make our way to the first combat plateau. This is the single toughest part of the game in my opinion when it comes to speedrunning, with many different moves all being strung together very quickly. First, we grab the firebox in front of us and throw it at the nearest lizard. The explosion hopefully pushes the electric shock box out of the way, which we haven't really used those in this run, but if you blow it up near enemies, it stuns them. Then immediately turn to the left and perform a Psycho Shock. The Psycho Shock in PO6 will actually push away physics objects if you're close enough to them, and also repel projectiles like missiles, which is something I didn't know until making this video. Neat detail, Chaos. So we want to perform the ground pound far enough away so they don't move, but close enough to stun the lizard that's lunging at us. Then, once he's shocked, we pick up him and the boxes and carefully fire them at the 3 remaining enemies. Once they're defeated, this will spawn the next enemy wave of a lizard, 2 flyers, and a worm. Normally, the play is to psychic knife the birds, stun and grab the lizard, and throw him at the worm. But in this case, the steel box Silver threw at the first lizard in wave 1 continued rolling and flattened the second one right as it spawned. So we're just able to psychic knife the worm and continue on. Switching to retail, since that was a lot of PO6, Nick begins at Silver's starting point and also uses an item capsule to tilt a box and set up a telethrow, flying him all the way to the second combat plateau. For PO6 to catch up, Mr. Future does a double Badnik bounce in the next section to reach the top route, grabs an invincibility capsule, then teleport dashes up the lava river, taking advantage of the sloped terrain to retain some of the speed. Then the second combat zone for PO6 awaits. Thankfully, it's a lot easier than the first, as we throw a box at the lunging lizard, then pop ESP mode to blast away the rest of the first wave. Then clean up the second wave with 3 psychic knives, hitting the firebox next to the golem instead of the golem itself since the firebox one-shots it. Then while in ESP mode, we quickly run through the next corridor, slapping an auto-stunned worm, which in Silver's heightened state one-shots it. Now that's a pimp slap. Then do a really cool flyby of the final part of the section and into the volcano. Back to 06, Nick performs a super extended teleport dash into the pit in front of him, but is able to go back in bounds by turning left after a bit since the collision becomes one-sided after a while, allowing him to skip the combat and make it to the volcano as well. Section 2 drops us onto a platform in front of a few enemies that are important in PO6 for filling up the maturity meter. Otherwise, it's pretty quick through the next couple rooms via the teleport dash. Then through the third door, we get to see another required use of the trick we learned all the way back in Crisis City, the rune animation cancel to jump onto the moving platform and hug the lava fall with a damage boost to skip the cycle of the floating rock going down and back up. Then we fly over to an item box and use the slope jump tech to skip some more platforming, psychic knife the purple titan guarding the door and activate ESP mode as it opens. This allows us to teleport dash all the way through the next room and a little bit into the titular flame cores area. To finish things off here, we activate some platforms, teledash over to the spring, activate the rune on the core, then watch a cutscene and run to the end. Retail, unfortunately, has to fumble around in the dark, getting to a steel crate as quickly as possible, tilting it on an item capsule just like section 1, telethrows, ceilings are a suggestion in this stage, out of bounds, and super extended teleport dashes to the goal ring. What a chonker of a stage. Before we end things off though, there's one more zone to run through, Blaze's Wave Ocean. Retail wonderfully bookends this series since Blaze can perform the same homing attack loop launch that Sonic can through whiffing the loop's homing attack target, sending the purple feline all the way to the whale section with the goal ring appearing screen shortly after. The remake utilizes the Fiery Cat's crazy aerial skills, with the ability to perform triple jumps if you sandwich a Fire Claw between 2 accelerator tornadoes, getting us to the top route just a bit quicker. The stage gets extended a bit at the end too, and now goes through some new, pretty fun level design with some baked-in secret shortcuts. Then we get to use some of the same tech from Shadow's story, where we hug this slanted wall face and jump, giving us extra height, then triple jumping our way to the goal ring, finishing the run a whole minute and a half after retail. Though the broken game won decisively for this campaign, for tradition's sake, let's compare the numbers with the loads removed. PO6's final load list time was approximately 18 minutes, and O6's was 11 minutes and 45 seconds, so the loads accounted for 1/3 of the run. Jeez. Yeah, PO6 had no chance. While by no means easy, Nick's skill and consistency with telethrows, levitation extensions, ETDs, and SETDs allowed him to fly through and sometimes around the hog stages. It's just that broken. While the series took a while to make, it was a blast. Huge thanks to Nick867 for not only racing me, but also being the one to have the idea in the first place, and to his fellow O6 speedrunner Reverie for giving me some pointers on what's even going on here. And just for fun for the complete series, the total load list time for Project 06's All Stories was approximately 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 22 seconds, while Retail 06 was 56 minutes and 31 seconds. And since Nick is playing the game on an original 360, he has the original load times, meaning that with the loads, they account for 19 minutes total across the entire run. Absolutely bonkers. Another thanks, of course, goes to the Big X of the Chaos variety for creating the silver renders for this video's thumbnail. Looks great as always. And last but not least, thanks to you so much for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.